All right, so we are in the Lenten season still. Lent goes 6 weeks. It's like one of those, like it's always the same. Sometimes Advent changes and becomes like a 3 weeks on a Sunday, but Lent is always the same. It's always 6 Sundays in Lent that we're going to hit. So we've got 6 stories of stones that we're going to go over. We started this on Ash Wednesday talking about written in stone. Last week, it seems so long ago. Does anybody know what we did last week? I'm having a hard time remembering what we did last week too. Normally I can pull this out. But last week, let me see, the story. It's going to come to me eventually, but we're going to move on. But we're going to continue in this series looking at stones. And the stones that we carry both physically and metaphorically are the things that we're talking about. It's the sin that we carry with us. It's the stuff like the judgmentalism. It's the stuff rejecting, cornerstone. That's what it was that we talked about last week. I knew it was going to come to me. Jesus as the cornerstone, rejected stones was the title. And we talked about rejecting Jesus as the cornerstone. And so when we're looking at this whole idea, we're saying that there's these stones that we need to not just bear and carry with us and pack in our bags and put it on our backs, but we need to lay them down. So today, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. You've heard that, right? I mean, it's a common one. I mean, people throw it around quite a bit. But here's and we all know the truth of the matter is that criticism, and especially like just out of nowhere, not in relationship, not asking for accountability and not asking for people just criticize. And it can hurt. It can deeply hurt. And so when you hear words, and especially as they are pointed at you, directed at you, those words can hurt. Now, some people give this, and I probably have said it along the way too. Like you just say, just ignore it. Don't pay any attention to it. Right? We just say that. It's like off the top of our tongue. Why? Because we're trying to be able to give somebody else advice on words that have hurt them, when really we haven't received that same words to ourselves. We're just like, hey, don't worry about it. I don't see that in you. That's ultimately what we're trying to be able to say. I don't see it in you, so I'm the only one that matters when it comes to the words. So if I have some of criticism to bring to you, I'll bring it to you, but nobody else gets to. Now that's also not right either. When we're talking about these things, we're saying, you know what, it's really easy to say just ignore it, don't pay any attention to it, but it's harder, especially internally then, to be able to wrestle with it. Because then we constantly think, is that true? Am I trash? Am I junk? Do I really not know what I'm doing? You see how those words and those words that are spoken actually have a lot more in-depth understanding and things that are happening. And this is why when we've talked about before, I think we had a series not too long ago about how words matter. About the words that we're speaking to other people matter. Why? Because we know that they're powerful. The tongue is a powerful thing, right? James, in his epistle, writes about the power of the tongue. He's like, the tongue can be a wicked instrument. It can bring fire upon people, and you're like, we should be careful with this tongue of ours. We should be careful with the words that we're speaking, because a single word, a single phrase, a single sentence can destroy. Think about the words that you have internalized to you and your life? Did somebody say, hey, you're looking a little bit more chunky this week? You're like, oh. Like I didn't know that my weight on display was something to be able to invite to you, that you should comment on it. We can easily try to dismiss it and talk about, well, I'm trying to have a positive body image, but still, what do? We're like internalizing it. We're always thinking about it. I want to have an outward positive body image, but really on the inside, I'm tearing myself down. I'm saying, no, I really don't look as good as I try to be able to tell everybody that I look. I'm trying to be able to put that out to the world, but I really feel internally insufficient. Somebody along the way, when you're going through school, and you tell a student, wow, you are dumb. And we're like, wait a second, like, and this isn't an indictment on teachers, but I mean, here's the thing. Across the board, we can use these little words along the way that we think are meaningless, or even that we believe might be joking, but they actually sting. And they're actually words that can stick around, because then you're thinking, whoa, maybe I am dumb. Maybe I can't accomplish this. I wonder how much, going back to my elementary school years, I wasn't good at math. Anybody else not good at math? And I mean, like I'm along. I know. I think I passed it along at least to my daughter. But here's the thing. So like there was early on when there were people be like, he's not good at math. He's not good at math. And then I'd hear it in the next grade. Well, he's not good at math. But then I also didn't. They didn't send me to like a tutor or anybody else. To be able to see. They just said, hey, you're not very good at math. And I'm like, cool. So this is the thing, and this is where I would go into like math tests, full of anxiety. Why? Because I'm like, I'm not good at math, so therefore this math test is not going to be good for me. I'm not going to pass it. I'm not going to do well. So let's just move on to something that I am good at. You see how that can be harmful? Even today, then I'm like, hey, I'm not good at math. I've already said this in sermon. I'm not good at math. And maybe along the way, if somebody told me, said, hey, you're not good at math, but let's try to be able to brush up on your skills. Let's try to be able to work, to be able to get to the place where we can get you to be good at math. Hey, I see more potential in you. But no, like the other potential were in other areas. Why? Because I had some skills in other areas. Little moments and little words, little phrases, little sentences can stick with you. Today, we're talking about the woman caught in adultery. It's a familiar story, John chapter 8, if everybody wants to jump over to John chapter 8. So in this series, really, we're just going to focus on one piece, usually one piece. Last week, we looked at two pieces. We looked at Psalm 118, which was the referent for the Mark chapter that we were looking back at. Today, we're just going to focus on John chapter 8. So this is the story of the woman caught in adultery. Everybody knows about the woman caught in adultery. Now, we never talk about the man also caught in adultery, but yes, I bring that up all the time because, yes, there has to be two that are caught in adultery, right? But, nope, it didn't happen that way. Patriarchal society. All right, we could go on that for a little bit, but here's the thing, right? So, Jesus is out teaching. He's talking, like it's almost like this. Jesus is in church, right? He's gathered people around. Maybe they sang some hymns before, some psalms or whatever it might be. They're gathered around. Now Jesus is turned to stand up and preach. So he's preaching to the congregation. Just kind of picture that in your head, almost like they gathered for outside church. Jesus stands up to preach, and then what happens? As he was preaching, as he was speaking, as he was delivering the message to the people, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery, and they put her in front of the crowd. So this is an interesting perspective right here. This is church. This is them gathering together as a people, and they're bringing this woman caught in adultery. Now, I saw one commentator, he said this. He said, I wonder if they caught her in adultery, and it's at that moment that they dragged her out. Was she even wearing clothes? And I never thought about how active it was that they caught her in adultery, that they wanted to be able to do this. They wanted to be able to shame this woman so much that maybe they didn't give her a robe to put on or her clothes to put on, but they took her and dragged her out before the community, before the whole town, and they said, here's this woman, shame. Now what's going to happen? I mean, this woman's sitting there, and it could be any other form of dress. I'm not saying it was necessarily that she was naked. But these Pharisees continue, right? I mean, so, teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? Right? So once again, these Pharisees, teachers of religious law, are trying to get Jesus to say things that are going to be against God, right? Against God's word, so that they can continue to pile the case up. They want to see Jesus burn. They want to see him hang. They want to see him on a cross. So if we can get Jesus to say something that's against the law of Moses, then we're going to be in a good spot. But really what they're doing, they're saying, hey, look at this woman. And this is where words matter. She's trash. She's a slut. She's a whore. These words matter. They were trying to bring her before the whole community to be able to drag her through the mud. And then they said, the law of Moses says that we should just pick up our stones right now and kill her. But this is the thing that's already happening that they didn't realize, that this woman was already dying. She's already dying inside. Why? Because this is her community. These are her neighbors. These are the people that she sees every single day when she's out in the courts, when she's out there buying goods, when she's out there being able to feed herself and possibly her family. We don't know about all of that, but here's the thing. She's out there every day. And now what are they doing? They're embarrassing her. They're trashing her. They're calling her names, and they're saying she deserves to die, and yet she's inside already dying. She's separated now from her community. You could already see some of the Pharisees, some of these teachers of the law already picking up their stones. And here's the thing, we got little stones, but when you would stone people, usually it was the kids who got the little stones. It was the men who picked up large stones. That as they put the person in the ground, they would put their head out, and those would be the only target. And they would take these stones, and every single person in the community, because it was a community sin, that they got to take these stones and hurl them at the people. You see, these are the things that happen when we pick up our stones, when we're ready to hurl them at the people that we feel are worse than us. It's been said that religious people are the only ones that ever shoot their wounded. Religious people, and we're looking at Pharisees, teachers of the law. We're looking at these people who are like, yeah, like it's really easy to take a look at these junk trash people and be able to pick up our stones and ready to be able to just murder them because we're going to see them as less than. Why is it that these religious people found their higher ground, their moral superiority, and they were ready to be able to say, I want to murder people that have less than moral superiority? We take a look at people in the religious communities, and we would look at them and we say, hey, wait a second, like you aren't as good as me. And there's no way that you can be restored. Yeah, we talk about forgiveness, don't we? We like to talk about forgiveness, and really we look at restoration, but it's always restoration from those that are coming outside of the church, and then we can say, you can be restored to come in, but don't mess up here or we're going to murder you. There's no restoration once you're here. Once you're here, don't mess up anymore. Don't have any sin. Don't have any failures, because you won't get the forgiveness here. Does it sound familiar? I've seen it hundreds of times. Stories, personally. That instead of being able to say, brother, sister in Christ, let's find a path towards restoration. Let's find a path towards reconciliation. It's going to go through some wounding, and it's going to go through some sorrow, but we want to get to the other side. But we don't do it. Jesus himself, when he's taken a look at this woman and this whole circumstance, right? We see the people who the person that only one person that's present in that group actually has the power to condemn. And the person who actually has the power to condemn says, I'm not going to condemn you. See, this is the power in the moment, because when we are seeing that Jesus is perfect, right? The Christ is there. He's a representation of God, right? He's standing in the midst. He has the power to be able to say, yes, I'm going to crush her. I'm going to make sure that she knows of her sin. But then Jesus, we see a different version of what can happen here. Verse 7, they kept demanding an answer. So he stood up again and said, all right, let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Let the one who's never sinned throw the first stone. So he didn't say, hey, let the person who hasn't sinned today throw the first stone. He's really trying to be able to get them to be able to see that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. He's trying to be able to get them to see a bigger piece of this. He's saying, if you've never sinned, yeah, go ahead, let your stones fly at this woman. And he even does the little thing where he's writing the message in the dirt. We still don't know what it was written in the dirt. It doesn't really matter what it was written in the dirt. What really matters is the words that Jesus was speaking, because somehow, some way, these Pharisees, these teachers of the law, these people who were in the community, one by one, start to walk away. Now we look at this story, and this is when it comes down to it. What we see here happening is that according to the rules, according to the law of Moses, the Pharisees are right. It does say this in the law of Moses. Not in the Ten Commandments, but in the law of Moses. In the law of Moses, it says, if you are caught in the act of adultery, then you should be stoned before your community. The rules, according to the standard, this was exactly what she deserved. We're not trying to be able to escape this, and this isn't about us trying to escape law. That's not what we should do. That's not how we stand before God. We're not just trying to get out of law. We're not just trying to get out of God's, kind of commands and moral code. No, we're not doing that. But here's what we do get to, is that this day, love and mercy won. This day, when this woman is caught in the act of adultery, she's not stoned to death. Jesus wins. The love of God, the mercy of the Christ wins. So if this story was told today, who would be the Pharisees? Who's the ones that kind of stand in the place of self-righteousness? We see it coming from religious leaders. We see it coming from within people of the congregations. We try to be able to reserve that kind of language for those other people that are just like really pounding the law kind of people, the people that are really just self-righteous, the people that are just, they really love all of this pious speech and these pious acts, and we're going to stand before God, we're going to cross ourselves, we're going to, bow down on the floor, we're going to make sure that everybody sees our righteous acts and our pious speech, and we're going to make it a show. The Pharisees, by name, the actual name Pharisee means people who have separated themselves. I found it to be interesting because according to this, then, what they are saying is that we are not like the rest of you, we are separated. Now, you can look at it in a positive way. God calls us to be holy just as God is holy. Holy means separated. They're saying we are the separated ones, the ones who are separated from the rest of these people, though. We are not like them. We are holy. And the Pharisees, in their heads, start coming up with all the ways that they are more holy than the rest of these people in the community. Can't we justify? I mean, we travel to church. Now, I don't have very far to travel to church. I mean, it's probably 25 to 50 steps, somewhere in there. So I can't even justify that I have to travel very long. But I can start to justify and say, you know what, I'm here between somewhere 8 and 8:30. The sanctuary is quiet. Nobody's here. I'm doing the work. I'm putting it in. I'm getting it done. Oh, look at this. Now, what happens? Like when we're saying, oh, but I got some areas that I can bring in here too. Let's bring a self-righteous party together and be able to put together all of our good works, all of the good things that we do by making it to church, like making it, so that we are the ones that can stand above anybody else who's out there and say today, like, but you didn't even come to church. I mean, we're a little bit better, right, for being here. I mean, maybe people who don't show up, that decide to go and live in pleasure instead of being subjected to the Word of God. Like it's happening to us. There's a part of us that we really do think about it in this way that, like we do have a right to pick up our stones to be able to carry others because we know God's law and we do our best as followers of Jesus to live it out. We're here. We get to do that. We get to pick up our stones and be able to launch them at people because they're not here. They don't go through what we go through. They don't have to suffer through pastors' long messages to have their kids complain after worship that I went too long. You see, we get the right, don't we, to pick up our stones? This is exactly what the Pharisees thought. This is exactly how the Pharisees wanted to be able to justify their right to pull people out being caught in adultery in whatever shape or form that they were in, bring them before the community and shame them, and even kill them. Jesus, notice here, and this is an important distinction, Jesus is not saying this woman is innocent. We'll go back to the text. We'll just make sure, so you don't think I'm making it up. So we go back to the text, right? Verse 10, we'll start. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I." And here's the phrase afterwards that shows Jesus isn't just saying you're innocent. He says, "Go and sin no more." Some translations say, "Go and leave your life of sin. Go and flee from that." Now, Jesus isn't telling her, go back to that relationship that you were just committing adultery and just keep on doing it until somebody else brings you before the community again and wants to kill you, and then we'll just do this all over again. No, Jesus isn't trying to be able to say that. He's not telling us today, go and be comfortable in your sin so that you can come back here and get forgiveness again. Why would we continue to try to be able to do that same cycle of self-destruction? Why? Jesus tells us, just like he's telling this woman, go and leave your life of sin. Go and sin no more. Jesus, as we read this story, over time, we recognize this story as being one we should not try to be able to condemn this woman. We would say, yes, let's set her free. Because we're looking at it, we see all kinds of injustice that surrounds this. Yes, this is the only woman that was brought before them. The man wasn't brought. She doesn't get to speak a word. She doesn't get to testify for herself because in that day, she had no word of testimony. They wouldn't believe her even if she spoke. That's injustice. Jesus, when we see him, when we're reading this story, we're saying, I connect with this woman, set her free. But how many times in our life do we look at things and consider it? and consider the people in our life and say, you know what, I shouldn't pick up a stone to be able to kill them either. Metaphorically. Lent is a good time to be able to reconsider. Lent is a good time for us to be able to say, who are the stones that I'm holding against other people in my life? Who are the people that I'm looking towards right now and just ready to hold this stone? I'm ready to be able to find that time to be able to catch them so that I can bring them before everybody else and so that I can start hurling stones at them. The stones that we hold, both real and imagined, already might be targeted for somebody else. So, as you heard in the beginning of church today, Emily and I spent the last 2 days, Friday, Saturday, meeting district and convention. Now, the district and convention is kind of when all the churches of the Northern Illinois district gather. So, we got lots of churches in the Northern Illinois district. So, it's not just Chicago, it's Chicagoland, and it's even the rural areas outside of Chicagoland. All the way up into like central Illinois, and then another district takes over down there. So, but when you're thinking, I mean, that's a lot of people, and it's a lot of diversity. There are times, and this is where confession comes from me to you, is that when I see these people, sometimes I want to throw stones at them. Like I get angry. I get angry when we're trying to be able to talk about issues that are close to my heart, like racism and anti-racism, and being able to bring things to say, let's have a discussion about how race has been played out in our church and where we have been separating ourselves from everybody else. And people are like, why are we spending time talking about this? This is what the culture is talking about. And I'm like, what? We're going to ignore this? We're going to say, I'm going to set aside important topics just because somebody else in the culture has tried to be able to, bring this to a different place than what we're actually talking. Like, this is crazy. And I have to tell you, and in confession, I've already, and as I've talked about with God in confession, but I bring it out today to be able to say to you that I've picked up stones and I've wanted to throw them at people. Both real and imagined. Because I don't get it. I don't understand it. And it breaks my heart. I don't have the right. Even when they're the people that I look at and see, it's like these Pharisees and religious leaders of the day. When I see them and I'm like, it seems to me that there's a mirrored reflection between them. And yet I still don't have the right to take my stone to be able to throw at these people either. So just like Jesus, if today you've never sinned, feel free to take your stones and start launching them at the people in your lives. For the rest of us, miserable, woke sinners, we go and lay them down.